This is a presentation on OpNav Instruction 5215.17a, Navy Directives Management Program. The purpose of this instruction is to issue policies, responsibilities, and standards for the administration of Navy Directives Management Program. The scope of this instruction is that the provisions in this instruction are applicable throughout the entire Navy, right, throughout the U.S. Navy. Navy Echelon 2 and below commands and activities may enforce stricter directive standards and practices. So a real quick review on how the echelons work. Okay, so we've got echelon 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 5, but we'll just break it down into echelon 4. So starting at echelon 1, that's the OpNav, right? That's the Office of the CNO, and this is an OpNav instruction, right? This is policy and guidance coming from OpNav, coming from the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations. So we have to follow this. Now everything below, all the instructions and policies set forth in these other echelons, in echelon 2, 3, and 4, that the minimum they've got to meet these OpNav requirements, but they can be even more stringent if need be. So echelon 1, OpNav, that's the Office of the CNO. That's what this instruction is coming from, okay? So when it says things like echelon 2, right, that's things like BUMED, right? BUMED, we see a lot of BUMED instructions on our bibliographies. BUPERS, we get a couple BUPERS. The Bureau of Personnel, right? And then the Pacific Fleet and the U.S. Fleet Forces. These are all examples of echelon 2s. They have to follow, right, this instruction. They have to follow this instruction and they can make stricter policies within their organizations. So staying in the world of BUMED here, if we looked at echelon 3s, your echelon 3s for BUMED, that would be Navy Medicine West, Navy Medicine East, and then NMEDLC, Navy Medicine Education Training and Logistics Command. And then if we wanted to look at examples of echelon 4, we can look at echelon 4s within Navy Medicine West, and that would be like the hospitals and the centers, the medical centers that fall underneath them, like Naval Medical Center San Diego, or Naval Hospital 29 Palms, or Camp Pendleton, or Naval Hospital Birmingham. Okay, so this is a quick review of how these echelons work. This is an OpNav instruction. It's coming from the top. It's coming from the top, so everybody below has got to listen, right? They've got to at least follow the minimum standards set forth in this instruction, and they can have stricter policies at their level. So we're going to define directives as formal written guidance that informs and instructs Navy personnel by communicating policy and procedures used in the performance of their duties. We got three types of directives we've got to be familiar with. We've got instructions, we've got notices, and we've got change transmittals. And we'll talk about each one of these specifically in a second here. When it comes to instructions, we can classify them as internal versus external. So organizations that put out instructions like the Bureau of Medicine and Surgery, the BUMED instructions. BUMED is still an organization that has to conduct business within itself. They still got to, run their shop, and so they'll do that with internal BUMED instructions, like, hey, this is how we're going to do things. And then BUMED also could put out external instructions. Most of our bibliography is made up of BUMED instructions that are telling the rest of Navy medicine how to conduct business, how to manage latent tuberculosis, how to manage primary care, how to manage immunizations and regulated medical waste. Right? Those would be their external instructions. Internal instructions, that's more of how they conduct business in house, how BUMED's running, its day to day within the command. Moving on to duplication and compliance. So directives must not duplicate higher authority directives. We're trying to reduce redundancy. So if you have an instruction from OpNav, from the CNO, that says, hey, we've got to do this, there's no reason for BUMED to duplicate that instruction. But if we need to amplify it, that's okay. So directives must conform with, right? It's got to be in line with and not contradict higher authority directives and issuances, okay? Try to avoid redundancy, and if we do got to amplify a little bit, if we got to add some more stuff onto it from a lower echelon, make sure it's conforming with the higher echelon. Moving on to continued actions and cancellations. So a lot of times instructions compel us to do something. They make us, take some sort of information or implement some sort of policy or procedure or anything like that. So any requirement for continuing action contained in a directive is considered canceled when the directive is canceled. So if there's a directive that makes us do, some sort of daily task or quarterly task or whatever, when that instruction is canceled, that task, that requirement should be canceled with it. The DD67, this form, the form processing action request, your DD67 is the form that is used to cancel a form. So if we need to take a form out of commission, right, we'd use a DD67. And then our authorized font for all Navy directives is the official font is Times New Roman font size 12. Okay, the official font for Navy directives is Times New Roman font size 12. So criteria, some differences between instructions and instructions and notices. So our instructions, we're going to say they establish, implement, or revise policy, right? Setting the rules of how the Navy's going to be run. Delegates authority or assigns responsibility or action. Assigns a mission, function, or task, right? Establishes a form or an information collection requirement, right? So we could say, hey, we're going to use like your tuberculosis instruction says, hey, these are the forms we're going to use when somebody's got a positive skin and duration when we do a PPD. This is a form we're going to use for monthly evaluation form. Our notices, these guys are short-term in nature. They should be 1 year or less. They set short-term policy, right, forms or information collection requirements. So when we just have to use a form very briefly or collect some information for a brief period of time, they establish or change organizational structure. They can be used for requests for comments, approval, or information, and they can be used for informative announcements like change of command ceremonies or education and promotion opportunities, recreational activities, work improvement plans, suggestions for morale building, or changes in office locations and telephone numbers, right? Very, very short term, just putting that information out. These things are usually done and they can't be in effect for longer than 1 year. So all Navy instructions, they've got to be reviewed annually, and we review them on the anniversary date that they were issued. We use the OPNAV 5215/40, the review of instruction. This is the form we're going to use to do our annual review. 5 years from the date of issuance, right, 5 years after instructions come out, that instruction that has not been revised requires revision or cancellation. If not revised or canceled by the 5-year anniversary date, the instruction is going to be automatically canceled. If by the 5-year anniversary date the instruction is considered to still be valid and current and a revision is not required, what we're going to do at a minimum, right, the instruction is going to be reissued under the next alphabetical suffix, with a new date and signature. So for instance, this instruction, right, our Navy Directives Management Program is OPNAV 5215.17 Alpha. If 5 years from when this was issued, we look at it, it's still valid, it's still current, we really don't need to change anything, we're still going to reissue it, but now we're just going to call it 5215.17 Bravo, slap a new date and a signature on it. If an instruction is canceled, right, if we didn't do what we needed to do, we didn't reissue it, and we allowed it to be canceled, but we still need to use it, its continued use is required, it's got to be processed as a new instruction with the next available point number. Change transmittals, if we did a change to this instruction throughout that 5 years, well, this doesn't work, okay? This isn't going to count as a revision or a reissuance. A change transmittal doesn't extend this date. We still need to revise the thing. All Navy notices, they're self-canceling, right? And they cannot remain in effect for more than 1 year. Exceptions to the instruction 5-year age requirement. So we make exceptions when it comes to inter-service joint instructions when we're working with other branches and when we're talking about our manuals, right? So if the Navy is a lead service, right, when we're working in a joint environment, and the joint instruction has not been revised or canceled by its 10-year anniversary date, it will automatically be canceled. So if the Navy is a lead service and it's a joint instruction, it's 10 years when that one gets canceled. If the Navy is not the lead service, the Navy instruction will follow the lead service's age requirement and format. When it comes to our manuals, Navy manual type instructions not revised or canceled by the 10-year anniversary date will automatically be canceled on that 10-year date. Extensions. 1-year extensions of the required cancellation or revision date as necessary may be authorized. So we can do these 1-year extensions. No more than 2 extensions will be allowed. The first extension may be approved by the signature authority of the instruction and may not be for more than 1 year. The second extension must be approved by the issuing authority. So for OPNAV, the issuing authority, that's the CNO, right? And for Echelon 2 and below, that would be the commander, the CO, or whoever's in charge of that Echelon 2 or below, right? This extension, again, cannot be for more than 1 year, okay? So we can do 2 extensions. They each cannot be longer than a year. Extension requests must be submitted via action memorandum at least 90 days prior to the 5-year anniversary date for the first extension and at least 90 days prior to the 6-year anniversary date for the second extension. Okay, a little bit of a review of what we covered. What term describes written guidance that informs and instructs Navy personnel by communicating policy and procedures used in the performance of their duties? Well, that's the definition of a directive. What instruction is the Navy Directives Management Program? The Navy Directives Management Program is OPNAV Instruction 5215.17 Alpha. What are the different types of directives? Our different types of directives are instructions, notices, and change transmittals. What form is used to officially cancel a form? Right, to officially cancel a form, we are going to use DD67, the Form Processing Action Request. What is the official font for Navy directives? The official font for Navy directives is Times New Roman, size 12. What type of directive is used to establish, implement, or revise policy? To establish, implement, and revise policy, we get that done with instructions. What type of directive is used to establish or change organizational structure? We're going to do that with notices. Change organizational structure with notices. What type of directive is used for change of command or education or promotion opportunities? Change of command, education, and promotion opportunities, we're going to get that done with our notices. What type of directive assigns mission, function, or task? Mission and function and task, we get that done with instructions. How long do notices remain in effect? A notice can remain in effect to 1 year. How often must all Navy instructions be reviewed? All Navy instructions got to be reviewed annually. We review them annually. What form is utilized to review an instruction? We're going to review instructions with OPNAV 5215/40. After how many years must an instruction be revised? We got to revise an instruction after 5 years, okay? We review it every year, we revise it after 5. What occurs if by the 5-year anniversary date an instruction is considered valid and does not require revision? Right? It's reissued under the next alphabetical suffix when a new date is put on there and a new signature. How long do inter-service joint instructions remain in effect if the Navy is the lead service? We're going to keep these guys in effect for 10 years if the Navy is the lead service. How long do inter-service joint instructions remain in effect when the Navy is not the lead service? Well, if the Navy is not the lead service, we're just going to follow the lead service's age requirement. Manual type instructions are going to be canceled if not revised by how many years? We cancel manuals if they're not revised, then 10 years. How many instruction extensions can be approved? There can be 2, right? And they cannot be longer than 1 year apiece. Who exercises overall management of the Navy Directives Management Program? So just think about how this instruction is labeled, right? Who's the author of it? OPNAV. So OPNAV is the Office of the CNO, right? The CNO exercises overall management of the Navy Directives Management Program. That concludes this presentation on OPNAV 5215.17 Alpha, Navy Directives Management Program. As always, I hope this helps and keep studying.